Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Scott McKain. Scott, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero.
David, it is a privilege to be with you and a pleasure. I follow you and I follow what you're doing here, and it's an honor to be asked to be a part of this. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Well, we're going to start with Scott. Are you ready for the greatest podcast ride of your life?
You've heard the Taxi Terry story, haven't you?
Oh, I heard it once or twice.
That's so great. You know, the funny thing is I was going to speak in your city. I'm at baggage claim in the Melbourne airport, and a guy came up to me and pointed at me and he said, "I don't know your name, but you tell the Taxi Terry story." And that happened to me at baggage claim in Melbourne, Australia. And I was blown away. It teaches the power of a story, right? I mean, we all have our stories, and it teaches the power of a story. So
well, I want to hear the story, Scott. But before we do, really quickly, for people that don't know Scott McKain, get your head out of the book that you are reading and pay attention to this, because Scott McKain is part of the Speaker Roundtable, which is basically like the Illuminati of speakers. He's a Hall of Fame sales and marketing speaker with people like Zig Ziglar and Dale Carnegie and Seth Godin. He's also part of the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame as well. Like, this man is an extraordinary communicator, and he comes from this wonderful background with as a DJ of 1010 WCSA.
How did you figure that out? 1010 CSI. Good afternoon. Oh my gosh, that's a good man. I hear that introduction. It sounds like I'm peaked. It's all over. It's downhill from here. Right? It's, good night, everybody. You're very kind. I really appreciate it, Laban. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor and a thrill to have you on here. And I don't know that I've actually had an opportunity to meet anyone that's got a street named after them. Scott McKain Way. Can you tell us about that, Scott?
Well, I'm from a very, very small town in southern Indiana. And they were kind enough to the city town council passed to make the main drag through town. They voted to make it Scott McKain Way. And I've got a buddy that joked that really I ought to go there back home and buy a little house on that street, so that if I ever got stopped for speeding, it'd be write me a ticket for Scott McKain speeding on Scott McKain Way. Would they really write you the ticket if you did that? But I'm just so humbled and honored that the folks in my hometown value, what I do and what I did. And I get back there all the time. I mean, my family's still back there in Indiana, in the United States. So I appreciate you mentioning that. It is really something to have your folks in your hometown appreciate what you do.
Well, I suppose it's a testament to the work that you've done. And, the thing that I neglected to mention as well, that you're a best-selling author of at least 3 books that I'm aware of. The Create Distinction is the book that I've had an opportunity to read. I haven't had a good go through the rest of them. I will, because I loved it. And you know what it made me do, Scott? It made me think about how I was going to enter this podcast, and I wanted to create distinction with the way that you and I connected. So I hope
well, you certainly have. You certainly have. Absolutely.
So let's talk about Taxi Terry, because people are like, "What? Hey, tell us about Taxi Terry."
Well, I was giving a speech in Jacksonville, Florida, and the flight's late, and I'm tired. We've all been there, and you drag your old beat up suitcase, old tired body through the airport. Now I get in a queue to get a taxi cab to take me to the hotel, and the line's long, and I'm tired, and I finally work my way up to the front. And you can imagine what I hear from other cab drivers and other passengers. It's where you going, how many in your party, cash or credit, those kinds of things. And finally, I'm the next guy, right? I'm the front of the line in front of the queue, and this cab driver pulls up and jumps out of his cab, and he points at me in the front of the line and shouts, "Are you ready for the best cab ride of your life?" And I start looking over my shoulder. I know what, this guy's nuts. And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." He says, "Get in." Well, now I'm afraid, right? So he runs over and he grabs my bag and he puts it in the boot, or the trunk as we call it in the States. And he jumps in the driver's seat and spins around to me in the back, and he sticks out his hand and he says, "Mr. McKain?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but how'd you know my name?" He said, "Saw it on your luggage. Figured I might as well use it." He said, "I'm Taxi Terry." And I'm thinking, why did I get stuck with a motivational cab driver? So we take off. Where are we heading, Mr. McKain? And I said, well, the Marriott downtown. Fantastic, sir. Let's check out the weather. Now, it's after midnight. My flight's late. I got to get up early. I'm tired. I just want to get to the hotel. I don't care if there is weather at this point, but he touches his dash and it lights up. He's got an iPhone and a very elaborate bracket. It's set to Jacksonville weather on weather.com. I know I could have looked it up on my own phone, but isn't it cool? He thought to provide something special to a customer. And then he said, man, I hope you're a golfer, Mr. McKain. You're going to have 2 awesome days in Jacksonville. Why are you here? I said, well, IBM's brought me in to give a speech about customer service. And the guy literally, customer service, I'm so into that. And he said, do you mind if I record our conversation? And he reaches up and he touches a button on the visor of the driver's side. And I'm like, who are you really? You know, there was a show that was on here in the States. I don't know where else in the world it's been on, but it was called Taxi Cab Confessions. And it was like hidden camera. You know, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a taxi cab confession here. I said, why are you so set up to record these conversations? And he said, well, you see, Mr. McKain, if Dr. Smith gets in, he's a local customer. And he mentions that his daughter, Jill, has just enrolled at Vanderbilt University. As soon as he gets out of the cab, I hit the button and I record that. And then at the end of every day, I take these recordings that I've made and I take that information from those recordings and I enter it into my database. I'm thinking a cab driver with a database, right? So he gets me to the Marriott and he jumps out of his cab and he gets my suitcase out of the back, my luggage out of the back, and he walks, he holds it, you know, like it was, you know, a child. And he walks the bag up and he hands it to the bellman there at the front of the hotel and says, presenting Mr. McKain. I had never been presented before anywhere, right? And he said, Mr. McKain, I realize that you will need a receipt for your business purposes. And someone brought you here, so I'm assuming someone has to return you, and I hope that's me. You can print out your receipt and reserve your return trip on my website, taxiterry.com. He's got web presence. It's amazing, right? I just never, it just blew me away. So the next morning I get up and give my speech, right? Well, that's the biggest thing that's happened to me for a while. So I start my speech by saying, last night at the airport, this cab driver said, are you ready for the best cab ride of your life? And everybody that worked for IBM there went, Taxi Terry. He's their official driver. He sold them a service agreement. And so it made me think so many things, Laban. I mean, it made me think, first of all, what an incredible experience that I had, right? From someone that didn't, in this time of Uber and everything else, somebody that found a way to make what they do stand out from the crowd. But another aspect of it I thought about is, you know, if somebody can get that level of connection and experience and service from a taxi driver, why shouldn't my clients expect that from me? Or whatever it is that, if you're watching right now, why shouldn't your customers expect it from you? And it gave me a new benchmark, a new bar to think of in terms of what we can do to connect with our customers and to serve our customers. Because, you know, he set an expectation, he exceeded it. He showed that he cared more about me, right? Showing me the weather. There's nothing in the job description of a cab driver, you know, that says you got to inform him of the weather, but he tied it in with his community. Hope you go. There's it's a golf course area there in Jacksonville. And, you know, being so interested in what you're doing, he wants to record it to make sure he doesn't miss any. I mean, all of those are out of a sincere concern to help and to connect. And it's just absolutely amazing what we can do if we follow in our own respective businesses, the things that Taxi Terry did.
It's such a powerful metaphor, Scott, and I'm really fascinated and curious to know, has there been any follow-up with Taxi Terry?
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you asking. So over the years, I've followed up, you know, because the bigger Uber got, and you'd read about all the trouble that the cab drivers are having, I was worried. So I started telling that story in my speeches, right? And during that project I was doing with IBM, I probably rode with him 20, 25 times. But then when that project was over, I didn't have a reason to go back to that city for a while, so, even though I was telling the speech. So now I book a speech there, and I'm going to go back, and I call him. And this time, instead of Terry answering, a woman answers, and she's very professional, very good. She sounds like a dispatcher, right? She's taking, and when I gave her my name, so he picked me up at the airport, she said, your name's really familiar. Are you that guy that tells the story about Terry? I said, well, yeah, that's me. She said, great. I'll make sure that he is the driver who picks you up. So I get off the plane. I'm like, and there he is. He's standing there with this new car. And are you ready for the best cab ride of your life? And everything. And in the States, it's different than Australia. In the States, often the passenger rides in the back seat and the cab driver in the front. And I like the Australian way of sitting in the front seat with the driver and talking to them. I'm in the front seat with him. And I said, man, I've really been worried about you. Is everything okay? And he said, yeah. He said, when you rode with me, it was just my car and me, just a guy trying to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. And I now own multiple cars with multiple drivers. I bought some vans, so we own a shuttle service. And he said, you wrote in one of your books about the importance of a specific, meaningful goal. And he said, for me, it was a limousine. I wanted to have a stretch limo. And he said, I cut a picture of one out and I taped it to my mirror so I'd see it every morning when I was shaving. And I used to sit for a moment in my taxi cab and I'd close my eyes and I would vividly imagine the smell of the new car interior of my new stretch limousine. And he said, I got it. And he showed me a picture and he said, the Clinton Global Initiative held a worldwide meeting at the Ritz-Carlton here not too long ago. And he said they had to pick somebody to be former US President Bill Clinton's driver for an entire week. And he said, who do you think they picked? And there in the picture is President Clinton and Taxi Terry. And I said one of the dumbest things, Laban, I ever said in my life. I said, wow, what did you say to Bill Clinton? He said, what else would I say? You ready for the best limo ride of your life? I'm like, of course. What else would he say? And I bet it was the best limo ride of Bill Clinton's life. So he's amazing and he's still doing well. And matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned that because just last week, I had a friend who was in Jacksonville and she heard the story so many times that she called him and, he's waiting at the airport and she said, he really did say, are you ready for the best cab ride of your life? I said, yes, of course he did. I didn't make it up. So and again, there's somebody in the face of incredible competition, right? I mean, not just other cab companies. I mean, now it's so easy on your phone with Uber. He found a way by creating distinction to not only make his business survive in the face of heavy new competition, but to thrive because he delivers something that they can't, that personal, caring connectivity and experience that we're all looking for.
I really love that, Scott. And it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's this abundance mindset, this love and abundance thing. And I picked it up originally off Steve Siebold, who I'm guessing you heard of as well. And so along with his and some other amazing people that I've had the privilege of learning from, I try and go into every interaction with every single human being with the mindset, what value can I add this? And in the year and a half or so that I've really concentrated this in, I can't explain to you the amazing abundance that's sort of flown forth into my life changing, in fact. And so now as a speaker, as an emerging speaker, this is the information that I love to share with people. And I had the honor of presenting to a bank, my first corporate client the other day. And here I am. And the subject is dino balls, right? And dino balls is a name affectionately given to me by some friends of mine in a mastermind group, females actually, because of my courageousness in getting on some of these huge heavy hitter names, yourself included, Scott. So
good, yeah.
So we're talking about the importance of being brave and dino balls and leading with vulnerability and empathy. And I suppose this leads me to my next question. Your father, who's since passed away, the wonderful Dallas McKain, who was a wonderfully talented musician from what I can tell, but also the owner of a grocery store that you had when you were growing up.
Yeah.
And that's where you seem to get a lot of your insights for the career path that you've gone down now.
You're so right. And gosh, I can't thank you enough for bringing it up. My dad didn't have a college degree. He hadn't studied business, but he cared about people. And that transcended transaction, right? When he put that first. And, your story, Laban, reminds me of this as well. There's this old cliche, knowledge is power. And it's not true. It's not true. It is the application of knowledge that is power. When I look at your background and your history and the addictions and the challenges that you've faced, it's one thing to know what you're supposed to do, but it's another thing to actually apply it and to do it. And we had, when I was a kid, a supermarket opened up in our community. We were the only little grocery store in town, and this big competitor moved in. And, one of the things Dad said is they can always beat us on the price of a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread, but we can outserve the competition. We can care more. We can do more. And I look back now, when you're a kid, it's your dad, you don't really often understand their wisdom until, it's funny how much smarter our parents get the older we are, and some of the things that I look back now at, the things my dad did that I'm like, how in the world did he come up with that? But it was really rooted in what you're talking about. It was really rooted in trying to be of service first and create an experience first, which leads to the business later. So many, today, I didn't even count them, but today I had several, people that wanted to connect with me on LinkedIn, and you accept them and immediately they're trying to sell you something. And it's like, I will never buy from them because I think you lead with value, or you lead with being of service first and then close the deal later. And we're missing that now. And so the application, Dad might not have known as much as the people that were leading the supermarket, but he applied what he knew in a way that made our little store survive and thrive to the point that the big box store closed and left town a few years later.
It's a wonderful story, and reading about the huge line outside the funeral home that just wrapped around the streets, like a testament to the work that your father did. And clearly that's had a major impact on you as a child.
Laban, I joked I could be elected president of the United States, and the headline in the local paper would be, Dallas McKain's boy does good.
It reminds me of an incentive trip that I won to Tahiti in 2003, and the sales rollers, and I was single at the time, and I took my father, and as you know, he's a retired radio announcer, but he was still on the radio, and by the end of the trip, I was known as Rick's son.
Exactly. Yeah. And it sounds like our dads were much alike, with your dad as a broadcaster. My dad, every weekend, he and his brothers had a band, and man, they played, every wedding reception, every event, they were the band in that area, country music band. And just a larger than life personality that people were just attracted to. And I just learned so much from that. I just learned so much from Dad was on stage as your dad was with broadcasting, but it's not enough to be on stage. You have to connect. And that's the same in business. I mean, every business is like that. We need to be like that as people, to put the connection before the transaction.
Well, that connection is something that I feel like I've developed a real knack for, Scott, and it centers around the power of vulnerability. And as you've read, I'm very public with my demons, right? Yeah. And it's kind of part of my healing process. And you're no stranger to adversity yourself. And I want to touch on something, and I hope you don't mind me asking this. I know your first wife passed away a few years ago from ovarian cancer. And my question is to you, the power of adversity, what is one blessing that came out the other side of that pretty tremendous experience for
Yeah.
you?
Gosh, there are so many, but the first one that really popped in my head when you were saying that, um, one night, not long before she went back in the hospital and went into hospice, um, she looked at me. She said, I've been thinking about it, and I'm so happy I had cancer. Well, that just floored me. I mean, are you kidding? This is the worst thing that's ever happened to us, and she said, yeah, but look, none of us are going to get out of this alive anyway. And she said, I had the chance to say goodbye to everybody. I had a chance to talk to everybody. I had the chance to, look, there's a million things I would love to tell her again, but there was nothing left unsaid. Now, if I would have lost her in a plane crash or an automobile accident or some other, yeah, there would be so much that's left unsaid. And what that taught me is none of us are guaranteed that we're going to make it through the day, So if there is something important to be said or something important to do, get started, say it, do it, because none of us are guaranteed what she considered to be a luxury, which was to be able to say the things that she wanted to and not only wanted to say, but that other people wanted to hear, to say to her. And that was one of the other great privileges of that, was to be able to say and to have her friends tell her how much she meant to them, was just, I mean, in spite of the terrible situation, that certainly was a great, great blessing. Every day counts.
Well, I thank you so much for sharing that, Scott. And I suppose thinking about my own mortality and my own legacy is something that's come to the forefront, particularly being involved in this industry. And I'm curious to know what you want your legacy to be.
Wow, that's a great question. That is such a great question, because I think so many of us get so involved in doing what's on our to-do list for today, or making things happen, that we don't think about that. But I would hope people would say he cared. He gave a damn. He cared about other people, and it wasn't just to get in their pocketbook. I mean, somebody that influenced my life was the late great Zig Ziglar, the author and motivational speaker, and Zig's famous line about you can have anything in life you want when you help enough other people get what they want. I mean, that's been a founding principle for me. Many years before I was given a speech, and Zig Ziglar was also on the program. And my wife and I checked, Sherry, my first wife, and I checked in the hotel, and there was a message at front desk. It said, call Mr. Ziglar in room, whatever it was. Well, oh my gosh, I feel like, a kid on the rugby field that the greatest player in Australia or New Zealand is saying, hey, you want to, you want to go get a drink? I mean, I'm blown away. I can't. I'm nervous on the phone. He said, I just thought maybe you guys want to go out to dinner tonight. Are you kidding me? So Sherry and I went out to dinner with Zig Ziglar. And he said, Scott, I looked and I couldn't find your book anywhere. I said, well, Zig, I haven't written a book. And he said, yeah, I know how that feels like, because I haven't written a book either. We look at each other like, we've got 10 on the shelf. Are you kidding me? You've got more. He said, but every morning I get up and I write 2 or 3 pages. And, after about 6 months, they come along, they tell me, Zig, you got a book. And it was like the light bulb went on over my head. I had never written a book because it seemed so overwhelming. It seemed like that was just so much to write a book that I never got started with it. But the next morning I got up and wrote 3 pages, and that was the beginning of my first book. Well, when Sherry passed away, it was, I don't know, a couple weeks later, I go to the mailbox and there is a package that said Ziegler Corporation. I thought, well, isn't that nice? Somebody sent me a nice book from Zig. And I opened up the package and there was an 8-page handwritten letter from Zig Ziglar talking about how much he remembered that night that we were out to dinner. And Zig and his wife had lost one of their children, but he was writing about that. But then he also said, but I can't imagine what it would be like to wake up in the morning and the redhead wasn't next to me, and it was just the most amazing thing. Well, so when Zig passed away, I just put a little video about that on YouTube, and I probably heard from 20 other people that he did that for. And someone was said, well, does that make it feel less special to know that he did it for a lot of people? I said, absolutely not. It makes me feel that he was more special than I even imagined. Because, I've got friends that have been friends of mine for years, and all they did was just sign a sympathy card and put it in the mail. And here this incredible man sat down and poured his heart out on this letter. And if there is a legacy, I mean, mine will be, this much, to Zig's this much, but I would hope it would be something similar, that he cared enough about people that he put people ahead of pocket.
Well, Scott, this has been absolutely wonderful, and I'm keen to know if you'd like to finish on any concluding thoughts.
The thing I would encourage anybody, and it's something I keep reminding myself, right? I mean, the thing I would encourage anybody is to think about the importance of differences. A while, after Sherry passed away, one of the things that she wanted to make sure was that I didn't sit around and mope. We had a chance to say everything, do everything. She wanted me to get back out. And so, a while later, I get back out there and I meet this awesome woman named Tammy, and it just worked out, anyway, I think sometimes the night I proposed, right? I did not get down on one knee, have that little box with a ring in it and say, honey, will you marry me? You're exactly like every other woman I've ever dated. We are attracted by our differences, not just our similarities. And so as we look at what we can do to create distinction, to become our own superhero, don't try to be like everybody else, and don't surround yourself just with people like you. And don't try to make your business like everybody else's. Find the things that can make you distinctive, because there is where the meaningful differentiation happens, that attracts more people to do business with us, that attracts more people to want to be friends with us, that attracts people into relationships with us, whatever we desire. When we help them and accept and appreciate and illuminate their differences as we do in our own, then I think the world becomes a whole lot better for everybody.
Where can we find you, Scott?
Hey, man, I just want to hang out here. It's just scottmckain.com is the best thing to show you, what I'm doing and all that. It's spelled McKain. There's a little bit unusual spelling, but just scottmckain.com. And if there's any way I can be of service, obviously I appreciate the privilege of doing it.
Well, if you have a look at the website, you will see that Scott is the epitome of doing what he says he's going to do and practicing what he preaches, because that website is the best I've ever seen. So congratulations, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Scott McKain.